comments. Tickety boo.
Oh, and Chikodili and Tendai, when the questions are coming, do you want me to handle those? So do you want me to sort of pick a question and pose it to you from what's provided?
Yeah,
Yes,
just so that we don't. Yeah, yes, please.
Sure.
If that's
Okay.
okay.
Yeah, of course. Just so
So we
it
don't kind of like
feels a bit
lose
more
focus
in
with trying to
control.
check and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. It can be easy to get a bit distracted by the chat thing.
Yeah, yeah. I got
people
so
might
distracted on Monday with the cane price chats because people kept on saying things. I was like, oh yeah, blah blah blah. And it was a mess.
But yeah, people do comment. Like as you talk, they may comment, and we may say things.
Yeah. Well, I can't. The good thing is I can't see it because that was on IG Live. You see, so I could see all the comments coming in. With this one, I can't see the comments. So unless I click on it.
Yeah.
So it's probably going to be less distracting.
Okay.
Okay, well that's YouTube Live working okay. So one more thing to click, then we're all set to go, technically speaking. There's a few people waiting outside, getting cold in the rain and wet, smoking their last cigarette before they go through the doors. Ah, memories. Live events with live people all together, eh? Oh, seems like a lifetime ago. Okay, a few folk coming, so what time is it? Is that 8 o'clock now, is it?
Yeah.
Right, perfect timing. I'll just check everything's ticking over. I'll just let my test account in first to make sure that's working. I've got a chap called the Beachcomber who's not really here, and I'll just make sure that's working. That seems fine. Yay! Get rid of that. Turn off the volume. That's us going. Wish, 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 wish. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to open the doors and everybody ready?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Here we go. Let them all in. Here we go. Okay, Russell. That's about it at the moment. So, oh, they'll come. They seem to come in dribs and drabs. So that's everybody in who's waiting. I think. Give them a few minutes to get themselves sorted. Hello, everybody. We're just letting people in. So just relax yourselves, and I'll hand you over to Russell, who's going to be looking after you for this evening.
Okay, so
are you telling jokes tonight, Russell?
No, I'm not.
Oh, thank
Sadly,
God.
well, you know, these jokes take me a long time to come up with them. So if I did them for every event, I would be exhausted. It'd be a full-time job.
So would we. So would we.
Yeah, it's all a very serious affair, of course. Anyway, so I think we'll get started, and then if more people roll in, that's great. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to our second ever interview session with Shoreline Infinity's Event Horizon. And tonight we've got a great talk about African monsters, weirdness, and how to write excellent speculative fiction. And shortly we're going to be hearing from Chikodili and Tendai, who I'll introduce in a moment. But there's a few house announcements. So the first is the kind of structure of tonight. So we're going to listen to them chat for about 30 minutes on their topic. And then it's your opportunity to ask any questions that you might have of them. So you can do that either by typing your question into the chat. And to open your chat, there's a little button at the bottom that says chat. You just click on that and you can type. We also encourage you can type and say things that are interested to you as the conversation's going on too. So it's kind of an active and interactive thing. Or you can wave to me and we'll put you on the mic at the end and you can ask your question in person. And about mics, if you do not want to appear on the internet, and you don't want your image to appear, then I recommend you turn off the webcam setting, because this is actually being broadcast onto the internet, so your image will appear forevermore. But that's pretty much it. Except to say, if you've got any comments or you want to share information or share your thoughts on this event, then you can use the hashtag Event Horizon on Twitter. And you can also follow us at ShoreInf, because if you didn't know, these events are actually all part of the Shoreline of Infinity family. And Shore Infinity is Scotland's best science fiction magazine. As I always say, it's its only science fiction magazine, but it is the best one. And that's what we do. And in fact, one of our speakers tonight has been involved quite heavily with the magazine. And I'll tell you, he may mention that, he may not, but I'll say so briefly in a moment. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking and introduce our speakers for tonight. So Chikodili Emelumadu was born in Worksop, Nottinghamshire, and was raised in Nigeria. Her work has previously been shortlisted for the Shirley Jackson Award in 2015, the Kane Prize for African Literature in 2017, and a NOM Award in 2020. In 2019, she won the inaugural Curtis Brown First Novel Prize for her novel Dazzling, and she can be found on Twitter at Emelumadu. I won't spell that out. You can see her name there on the screen. And our other speaker tonight is Tendai Huchu, whose work has appeared in many publications, including Lightspeed, Interzone, and Afro SF. He's the winner of a NOMO Award for African SFF and has been longlisted for the Prix l'Afrique 2020 and shortlisted for the Kane Prize and the Grand Prix de l'Imaginaire. His new fantasy novel, The Library of the Dead, will be published by Tor in the US and UK in March 2021. You can find him at Tendai Huchu on Twitter. And he was also a guest editor for our Shoreline, the recent issue of Shoreline, which was a spotlight on BAME sci-fi issue. And I'm going to shut up now and pass you over to our great speakers, Chikodili and Tendai.
Thank you, Russell. That's brilliant. Hey, Chikodili.
Hi.
Been a minute, hasn't it? Yeah, last saw you last
I'm trying to fool
August.
everyone into thinking I'm quiet normally.
No one's gonna believe that. I think we met last August and we were due to meet this August.
Why are you making it look like we only met last August?
Festival. No, I mean in the flesh, like you know what normal people used to do before this Zoom stuff.
Dude, you've been to London. You've been to London once. We met in London the first time, and then the second time we went. Yeah, you came to my house.
Our most recent encounter.
Oh, is that what you're talking about? Oh, right.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, hopefully, you know, before the apocalypse, I think we were hoping you'd come back in August. It's just not gonna happen.
It's actually on my calendar now. Yeah, it says trip to Scotland, and the whole of August was blank because I was supposed to be staying in your flat. You're supposed to go away somewhere, and you're supposed to give me your flat.
Exactly.
And now that's not happening. So, well, Scotland is still on the horizon for me.
I get to keep my flat, but the reason I'm outlining this is we met online the very first time. We kind of met in a creepy sort of like stalkery way. How I found out about you is I was reading Apex magazine. That's closed down, hasn't it?
No. They're running a Kickstarter right now to get it up again. So it's coming up. It's coming back again. Yeah, it only went on hiatus for a bit. All
right, yeah, there was this magazine called Apex, and I was reading through it, just going through stories, and this is about 2014, 2015, thereabouts. And I came across the story called Candy Girl that was absolutely extraordinary. And I did what I, sometimes do when I enjoy a piece by a writer, is like I look them up, stalk them, and email them to say, I've really enjoyed this great piece of art. And somehow we clicked and we've stayed in touch ever since, and we've become great friends. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't give me much of a choice, did you? You sent an email every day until it got so much. I had so many Mondays, I had so many Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and that kind of like petered out. But I mean, before then, or just around then, I had also read Headdress of Harare. No, Headdress of Harare.
That's the one.
Which I really, really liked. So it was kind of easy for me. You weren't a stranger. Like I had heard of your name before, and I was like, oh yeah, thanks so much. what I didn't expect was the, yeah, we're friends now, so this is happening. Okay, I was like, oh, okay, fine, But yeah, it's been a good few years, and your flat is mine. Whatever you possess is mine. Yeah.
You can have it by all means, but outside of that, like, we also have this sort of like working relationship in which we beta each other's work, sort of like beta read. That's for those that are not in the know of the lingo, it's like when you write something and you think, my God, this is like the best thing ever written. But before you send it out on submissions to sort of like publishers or editors, it's worth sending it to a few select trusted friends just to go over. And I don't know how we started doing that, but
I'm not sure. I think basically it was my usual thing of writing. At the time when we met, I was writing a lot. I was staying up all night. I had a 3-year-old, maybe 2-year-old at the time, and I was staying up a lot. And basically, I was producing a lot because I wasn't really sleeping, if you remember. So the problem I had at the time was insomnia. And because I was producing a lot, I needed to have eyes across all the stuff I was writing. And so I think I can't remember, I think I asked you once if you could look at something. And then you said, yeah, sure. And then you got back to me almost immediately with it. And I was like, okay, fine. Can you look at something again? And you said, okay. And I sent you, like, I've basically been sending you stuff ever since. And then you sent me stuff. And that's how it's just been going. So sometimes you have like 3-4 pieces because I've just been really productive in like 2 or 3 days and got like 4 pieces out. And I know that if I have a nap and wake up, you will have checked at least one of them. So I think that was how that started.
I mean, 2015, 2016, that period, you were like very, very productive and producing like really great work, and I was fortunate to sort of like.
Why are you making it look like my productivity and my really great work is over? Why are you making it look like it's a thing of the past?
We're gonna go into the novel because then you were publishing so regularly, and eventually at some point I was doing quite a bit of short fiction as well,
yes.
And then eventually at some point we all wound up in African
Monsters. Yes. In fact, the story of me winding up in African Monsters is funny because I wasn't meant to be in African Monsters, if you remember.
Yeah.
I think somebody dropped out, and then you asked them to write me, didn't you? Did you ask them to write me? Yeah. Yep. So they wrote me and said, do you have something for us? This is what we're trying to do. And because I didn't think I had anything for them, they gave me an extended deadline of a month later. And that story was what made it into the Kane Prize shortlist. It wasn't even one that it was just a story that I felt pressured in my mind to write, but it wasn't one of those things that I thought was, it was going to kill me if I didn't write it. It was just a very easy story because it was there, it just appeared and I just wrote it down. And that was my first time of being shortlisted for the Kane Prize. And this year again, I got shortlisted again. I didn't win. I would have been celebrating with right now, but I didn't win. But it's twice that independent stories of mine have actually made it to the Kane Prize. So like independently published, I mean. But yeah, that was our first one.
Which is brilliant. And there is something in your stories, they tend to have like this dark element. But I want to go back to 2017 to the African Monster story, Bush Baby.
Yes.
And if you could just say something about the very sort of like peculiar, very folkloric Nigerian monster that you created for this particular piece.
Yes, I mean the Bush Baby is supposed to be a monster that exists already in Nigeria. Nobody really knows what it looks like. There are all kinds of stories about how it's a particular animal and all sorts of things. But it's a story that terrorizes a lot of people in boarding schools. And you can imagine why the boarding school is a fertile ground for monsters, because you're away from your family for the first time. You're 10, 11, 12. I went to boarding school at 9 years old. So, and I went to a school that was not even in the same state that my parents were in. It was, 2 states over. And so, you know, the Bush Babies is a story that tends to terrify a lot of people in boarding schools because, you know, you're young and you're away from your home and you're living in a hostel with a lot of strangers, and you're having to survive and manage your provisions to make sure you don't get hungry. And you're basically growing up, you know, you're shifting your sphere of influence from the family to yourself and to your peers. And so the Bush Baby in a lot of Nigerian stories is something that people hear crying like a natural baby, and then upon investigation, they get killed. So nobody ever knows what it looks like really. However, the way that I restructured it, I took that monster, the unseen, unknown monster that nobody can really say what it is, and I crafted a story around it, using some of the Hausa urban legends about, you know, the Gwe being a guy with a man with a mat, you know, and I basically made up this story about a girl who has come back from living in the UK, only to find out her brother, because her mom's died and she's gone off to the UK because she can't deal with it, only to come back and find out that her only brother has squandered her father's property in search, like he's a gambler, so he squandered all this property, and the only way they agreed to give it to him back is if he could go into this forest and retrieve a mat from a guy in the middle of the forest. And he does that. What he doesn't realize is that it's the monster's mat. He's just gone and he's taking something from this monster, and he gets to pay for it, you know, systematically in a very visceral way.
So there is that something about, you know, the monsters that you first hear about when you're young, you know, and you really believe in these stories and these narratives, because what you're saying about the Bush Baby and going to boarding school at 9, I remember I was pretty young, but I have a cousin called Peter, who was like an excellent storyteller, or so I thought at the time. But every time we used to go to bed when he was visiting, he would tell the story about the Mpogonyonyo. And the Mpogonyonyo, and this sort of shows you, because it used to freak me out. The Mpogonyonyo was supposed to be, if you went out at night after dark, which you weren't supposed to do, you would encounter this really tall man whose head was up in the clouds somewhere and who had a cigarette dangling off his lips. And he would bend over and say to you, "Dene Mpogonyonyo," which is, I know, right? But that was so scary for me then.
Yeah.
But when I think about it now, it doesn't quite have that same
Impact.
effect.
Yes.
But also thinking about my piece in this African Monsters, I created, there's this mythical thing in Zimbabwe where if you want to make money, you go to a traditional healer or, you know, a witch doctor, someone who practices the dark arts, and they create this thing called the Chikwambo for you. Now the Chikwambo it's pretty vague as to what exactly it is, but you start making money. If you're in business, you start to prosper, you start getting more customers, etc. Your business starts thriving. But the price you pay for all this money coming to you is the Chikwambo needs blood. And that blood typically is going to come from your family. So that was the thing that I also played with, this sort of like really traditional belief. And I thought I could update it.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that, I mean, if you think about the way that our horror stories really are structured, right, in African culture, it's usually horror stories that are supposed to preach about the unification of the community. So basically, we're very communal minded versus individualistic, because it's the same thing we're talking about here. The terror in the Chikwambo story is that you're sacrificing members of your own family. That's such a taboo, you know, because you're not supposed to stand alone. You're not supposed to have money by yourself, you know. Right. Likewise, in this Bush Baby story, it's this guy who is actually trying to get money back. The money that his father left him, that he squandered, he wants it back. And he doesn't seem to realize that the relationship he has with his sister is more important than all the money and all the girls that come with the money. You know, he's suffering right now, you know, over the consequences of this action he's taken, because he's trying so hard to be something by himself and not rely on his sister or rely on his family, if you know what I mean. So a lot of the tales that we have coming out from us, like from the continent, have to deal with, you know, the dangers of standing alone, because people that stand alone are not to be trusted. Like, where's your family? And, you know, we also have, I don't know if you guys have this in Zimbabwe as well, the whole spirit husband thing, where a beautiful guy comes to marry a woman, but he comes with nobody, and she sees his beauty and she says, you know, this is the guy I want to marry. He's so handsome. Look at his ex. Everything is just sweet, you know. And she wants to go with him, and they're saying, no, you can't go with this guy. Where is his mother? Where is his father? Where are his people? There's no lobola. Where's the bride price? What's going on? You know, so I think the terror in a lot of the stories that we tell each other, it's fine. There are stories that have to do with darkness, but even that darkness is symbolic, is the unknown, you know. We're all afraid of this unknown, but also our stories are tied into the dangers of being a person alone, the dangers of standing alone, the dangers of being an individual, the dangers of trying to do it all yourself, because then you have nobody watching your six, you have nobody watching your back. And so those stories, I think, can still be crafted for a modern audience, because we still have the same concerns nowadays.
That's true.
I mean, yeah, we still have the same concerns nowadays. So I think it's a little bit different in that you're just moving from the rural setting, the village setting, to like where there's Wi-Fi and electricity and planes and cars and all that stuff. But people are still largely afraid of the unknown, the darkness. You know, you see a guy with all his, you know, all his belief in science. I'm not saying science is bad, so please don't come for me, but all his belief in science, all his logic, everything, you know, and going to his village scares him. It terrifies him. You know, it's not just the idea of, you know, going to a place where people don't have a lot. There's that, people don't have a lot. And so it's very much crabs in a barrel. They want to grab at you and get at what you've got. They don't necessarily want to share. They want to just kind of like get rid of you and take what they think you have. There's that fear, but there's also the fears that we've grown up with, the fears of the unknown. You don't know who is out there or what's out there, or who is taking your name to what idol and swearing that you die, and then some golem creature is after you because they've whispered your name into its ear. You know, people are afraid of that, and all it takes is for you to strip away those comforts, you know, that they have surrounded themselves with in the cities and in the towns, and we're back to that instinctive fear, you know, that illogical, irrational fear that is there. It's
There's
prevalent
something
in
primal
everyone.
about it.
Exactly,
Yeah.
it's in everyone.
And I also find, like, you talk about the unknown, I find my favorite monsters have this quality about them where you can't quite make out what they are, what they're about. Because, you know, thinking about it, I remember when I was a kid watching Predator with
Right.
Arnold Schwarzenegger for the first time.
Yes.
You know, and I was waiting. I don't even know why they allowed me to watch that, because I just wasn't ready. And
because we don't have those sensors. We don't have those sensors back home. They're like R18, put it on, everybody's watching it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I actually went through a period where just leaves rustling in the wind would scare me because I thought it was out there. But the thing about it then, because you didn't quite know what it was and what was going on, it was just so scary. Flash forward to all the sequels and all the explaining that's gone on over time, and it's just this alien hunter thing that comes, and you lose that fear. I watched the last sort of like Predator, and I was just like, come on guys, just, you know, put this thing to bed. Same thing happened with Alien. Like the first one, it was just like, what is this thing? And so you as the viewer, which is the same for the reader, could project so much on to these things, these monsters, essentially.
Yeah.
And because a monster has to have some element of mystery in order to work.
Yeah, I think so too. And also we have to be we have to be aware that, you know, people's fears shift with their experience and their age. And so Mpogo Nyonyo with the long man with the, I mean, sorry, but that's actually quite scary if you think about it. I'm thinking I'm alone in the house right now. Mpogo Nyonyo is scary for a child because it kind of like taps into this, you know, I don't know if this ever happened to you when you were a child, where you look up at the sky for something, I don't know, and you're suddenly aware of how vast it is and how you're tethered to the earth. And it is scary. You're this tiny little person, you know, being told when to eat, what to eat, who to play with. You have your entire life structured by your parents. And, you know, the Mpogo Nyonyo comes into that. It basically, it kind of breaks all the rules. Because if you think about it, the parents didn't believe in Mpogo Nyonyo. I can assure you, they would tell you, no, there's nothing to believe in. There's no monsters. There are no monsters under your bed or whatever. But you as a child who had all these rules and regulations around you, right? It was as if that was the only place your parents could not control was your mind, okay? And so as a child, that is, your fears are different from like the fears you have as an adult. And I'll give you an example. When I was a child, you know, with the fact that we didn't actually have restrictions on things to watch, like we've just said, I would watch things like, I remember watching the Nigerian Biafran War, for instance, and that's like a real life horror scenario, right? And feeling absolutely nothing. You know, I found it funny with the big belly children. I was like, what, 5? It was just funny, you know? But as a mom now with children, I understand how scary it is to be separated from your children. I understand, you know, whereas from a child's point of view, I was butting heads against the very things that are meant to keep me safe. You know, as an adult, what you find is that those you kind of, your perspective has changed. So now the stories I find scary are things like stories of psycho killers coming into the house and holding the entire family hostage. Or, you know, you move house and there's an evil force in there and nobody knows where this evil force, what does this evil force want? Why do they keep possessing children and dolls? Nobody knows. But those ones, you know, the things that have to do with having your children in danger and you not having any power or any control over the outcome of their lives, those are scary. Whereas as a child, what you wanted more than anything was to be believed, to be seen, to be heard. And so a lot of stories that circle around, horror stories that have a protagonist as a child, they go through that period of not being believed either. You know, there's something under my bed. There's nothing under your bed. They put on the light. See, there's nothing under your bed. And you're thinking, yeah, but you just put on the light. Of course, the thing under the bed is gone now because you're here, you know?
Yeah, it's really interesting because, you know, what we are ultimately talking about at the end of this is sort of like fear, right? It's not your cute, cuddly Monsters Inc. type monsters that you see in pop culture today. But I was also thinking, you know, we wanted to talk a bit about process and, you know, the craft of writing and sort of like the time we have remaining. Yes. At the moment, you've done a novel, which, because I remember you were pretty prolific with the short stories, and then this novel project started, and for a while you almost disappeared from my life.
Yeah, but that's because you're always asking me to send you stuff. I was like, I don't have any stuff to send. You send me stuff. And then you were sending me stuff. And then I had nothing to send back, which made me feel guilty, which then made me kind of like ghost a little bit.
Yeah, you ghosted me. But you're back. So you won the Curtis Brown First Novel Award for Dazzling.
Yes.
And how was that experience? I mean,
winning
a
or
big project like that,
itself.
Just completing a project of that size.
Oh, I mean, I completed it before, as you know. It was like 94,000 words of utter madness. Because you were saying to me, just send it out, just send it. And I was like, no, it's not ready. And then you said, send it to me, and I did. And you were like, yeah, it's very, it's a lot, and it was all over the place. So I've completed it a few times. I did that, and then I got rid of it, and I did 50,000 or 53,000 words. And then I was told to kind of like fill it in with all the stuff I'd taken out of the one I gave you. So I kind of filled in, and now it's 95,000 words. But it was I think because I had got into the spirit of writing short stories and writing these horror stories, that you had to hit the ground running with your monsters. You couldn't kind of like faff about with it. It was really challenging for me to draw out the process of either discovery or the conflict itself, or the journey that this hero had to undertake. Because for short stories, it's been a totally different kettle of fish for me. We talked about it with what's your other one now with what's that monster you are telling me? Tokolosh? What's a Tokolosh again?
Tokolosh. The Tokolosh
What is it again? Yeah.
A Tokolosh is sort of like it's a South African thing. We also have it in Zimbabwe, and again it's one of those, like, it's in the Zimbabwean conception, it's like the small spooky creature.
Yes. Yeah, but we were talking about it because of something. I've totally forgotten. Anyway, so so I mean, it was interesting, being in having that much space to work with, and which is why I didn't get it right the first time, because it was a lot of space to fill. But I think where it is now is my agent has it, and hopefully it should be okay. But to kind of like go back to your point about the best kinds of monsters. I mean, we've talked about the fact that they have mystery. That's one. The second thing is, like, the best kind of monsters, they have to work for the audience that you're writing towards. It has to be something that will make them basically not sleep at night and will make them just crap themselves, But I think the third thing is that we have to understand that really, whatever monster we are writing, we're all writing the one fear that we all have, and that's death, the unknown, and that's what we're trying to avoid when we craft these stories. Exactly, when we craft these stories to do with monsters, is basically inoculating people against the great unknown, but with it's giving you the little poison, so that you don't succumb quicker to this big thing. Do you know what I mean? So it's like a vaccination. We give you a little bit of the poison so that you can kind of handle your day to day, because the world is full of terror. I mean, what's that saying from Game of Thrones again? What is it again? Is it the night is dark and full of terrors, or something like that? For like the followers of Rollo, the nights are dark and full of terrors. The world is full of terrors every single day. And considering the kind of world we're living in, with the pandemic, with Trump as president, with all that's going on, it's a lot of horror. I mean, I said to people before, it's sort of like you either in this pandemic go one way of reading all the comedy stuff, all the, stuff that is light and airy and bubbly, or you go full deep and dark, which is what I'm doing. Just inoculate yourself. It's already bad. Just take the kind of stuff that you can kind of handle. You finish the story and you close the book and you're like, okay, fine, I can deal with this now.
In a certain way, there's also that because you speak about death and all these terrors that we experience through life that are a normal and unchangeable aspect of the human condition. But there is also that catharsis that you get where the hero triumphs over this monster. I remember when I was in primary school and I came across this book called like Men and Gods, and it had all these Greek myths in it, and I mean, the Greeks, they had killer monsters for days, man.
I tell you.
And
I used to have like an almanac of all the monsters, man. They had some.
Yeah. And if you're following sort of like Heracles on his adventures, there was always the bit where he bested the monster, and you'd be like, phew, this is great. But part of it as well, for us, as writers these days anyway, especially with everything that's going on, you almost get to the stage where like real life, I mean, the world that we live in is already pretty sci-fi.
Right.
And it's got a healthy dose of horror going through. I mean, how can you even craft a narrative that competes with that today? Because the news alone is just, how can you craft any narrative that competes with like this mad world that we're living in right now.
Yo, listen, like, don't even try to compete. The world is crazy. Just do what, no, seriously, like, I think that's why horror is popular, because like I said, it's small doses of something that will scare you and make you, like, you know, like how when you're a child, darkness scares you. Come on, darkness still scares all of us even till now. All it takes is for like some major blackout and you see people at their worst. So I think you can't compete. All you can do really is provide people with a safe horror experience, a place where all their fears come true, but it's okay because we're on your side. We'll not let anything bad happen to you. And that's a way of kind of like, listen, we're like doctors, okay? Like our job is important. We are giving people like serious like vaccinations here to be able to survive their lives, you know?
They need to clap for us, right?
They need to but seriously, like you have, our job is to provide people with a safe place and also to provide those universal themes, those things that everybody is, you know, they can connect. You look through the writer's eyes or your narrator's eyes and you understand what it is they're talking about. That's our job. Our job is not to kind of like make people or to compete with what's happening out there, because what's happening out there is already a lot. It's just to give people a different arena to process what's going on, to be able to engage different parts of their brains, you know, through something that is, you know, that is controllable for them. Because at any point, if you're reading a book, you can close the book and walk away. You don't have to finish. I mean, finish our work, obviously. You don't have to finish any other person's work, but finish mine and Tendai's work is good. But yeah, but you can, it's a controllable, you know, it's a controllable thing for people. And so I think if you're going to craft something, just craft something that you want to read yourself, man. You know, don't cheat the reader. Make it so that somebody comes out on top. It's monsters we're dealing with here. Fine, the monsters can win sometime, but other times, you know, let the reader win.
And ultimately, that's what you're doing, right? You are writing the story that you yourself want to read, because ultimately,
right.
You're always the first reader of your own work, and there's always this hope that if you like something, because you've liked other people's stories before, that there's just enough people out there in the world that are into the same thing you are. And
yeah, right. Because really, I mean, we're all just hoping to get understood, Tendai. We're all hoping that, for instance, that somebody feels this fear I feel of, for instance, you know, walking down the road, stepping on a manhole cover, and just disappearing, and people going, "Oh, there's a manhole cover," and then covering me up. You know, I'm still alive. Those are horrors as well. And then there's something down there. Just kill me.
That's why you've got to avoid the lines on the pavement. But
I do. I know you think it's a joke, but I really do, because I'm thinking, not today, Satan. You're not gonna get me today. Not today, mole people.
Yeah.
But what are your fears, Tendai? What's your big fear?
Big fear. I have plenty, but I also do know that I think I've seen a few questions come through if Russell's gonna pop back in.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know where Russell's gone.
Hello, I'm back.
Hey. Hi, Russell.
Yeah. Thanks so much for that chat. That was really great. I turned myself off, but I was kind of laughing away. And you said some really interesting things as well as amusing things. So that was really wonderful. Thank you. So yeah, Tenda, you're right. There are some questions coming in. Chikodili, are you still there? Yeah, sorry.
I am. I was trying to see the questions myself because.
Yeah. So one's come in from Phil Wild, which we'll go with first. So how important is sharing fear or horror?
How important is sharing fear or horror?
Yeah.
It's like how important is sharing any feeling? Fear is a valid feeling, you know. If you share fear or horror, then, I mean, this is probably selfish, okay, but whatever, you can't sue me. When you share a fear or a horror, something that you find terrifying, because ultimately we're writing from positions of things that we find terrifying. And sometimes in the story, it's not the story that is being told that is terrifying, even if there's a creature in it. It's the underlying stuff, you know, the loss of family, you know, loss of friends, being alone in the world, that kind of stuff. You know, all we are seeking is understanding. And so sharing fear is like sharing any other experience, joy, love, you know, sadness. It just helps you bear it, you know. So if you're a reader and you're reading something and you read something that scares, you know, the life out of you, in a way you come out relieved, because it's not just you. Anybody who picks up that book is going to encounter that fear. And moreover, the person who wrote the book is also encountering that same fear. And so it links us in our humanity. It's something that we all share. So nobody is alone, which is a massive human fear. The fear of loneliness, the fear of being being misunderstood or not understood by anyone.
Yeah, for me, there's almost that like toxic masculinity thing where you are afraid to express any kind of vulnerability, and certainly fear is you know, because you are, you know, the way I grew up, you were always supposed to be brave, boys don't cry, that kind of thing. So yeah, so you were supposed to man up at things, and expressing fear was kind of frowned upon. So you learned from an early age that you had to repress that. You always had to be in control, and in a way, it's something that even now that I'm like older, I struggle with. So, for example, your question about fear, right? I brought Russell in. Maybe that was, you know, a sort of like, I don't know, maybe some Freudian thing going on of avoiding the question. But what I'm afraid of.
Yeah, how convenient that you haven't answered that.
I'll get it out of him, guys. Don't worry. I'm about to tweet about Tendai's fear.
I think, well, there's certain child. I was one of those kids that was always afraid of the dark. But again, at some point, you get told boys are not afraid of the dark, and you cannot express that. So you proper shitting yourself when you go out in the dark, but you could never express that visceral fear that you have. But the other thing for me that I really don't dig is snakes. I mean, like, no, that's just a big no.
Well,
and I've had
to my village. You can't come with me to Nigeria, man, because our totem is a python, a royal python, like an African python.
Oh no, that's just not my thing.
Well, there goes our Nigerian trip then. Oh well, I tried.
I think that's really interesting what you're saying.
I think for me, I mean, I'm not going to tell you my fear. I'm going to tell you my second fear, which is a new fear. It's probably the reason why I kind of like was going to the gym and trying to fill my whole body with muscle, is a scenario that will require me saving one or the other of my children. You know,
oh God.
I cannot deal with that. And so I was trying to be physically strong so that I would be able to take both of them at once. And, you know, it's something that will haunt me to this day. You know, I still think about it. Even right now, I'm beginning to, you can see me kind of like going like, because I'm sweating a bit thinking, which person is out there listening to this and is going to try me with my children? Please don't try me. Please, I beg you. But that is my fear. Anything that will make me have to choose one child over another is a nightmare scenario. I would rather just take my own head off, you know, rather do that. But for me, that's like a genuine fear. And so a lot of these fears where, like I mentioned earlier at the beginning of this chat, you know, I was watching this film with Gabriel Union where they have this high-tech house that they have just moved into, and her husband is away. I mean, not that it matters, obviously, because there's always the idea that, oh, if the husband is around, everything will be fine. The killers know that. They always go for the husband first. They kill the husband first, and then everybody is kind of like having to save themselves. And so, you know, the husband was away, and so it's her and in this high-tech house that's supposed to do everything, and intruders come in. Because apparently, I think maybe the old owner had some jewels or something somewhere, and she's having to save her son, herself, and her, you know, or This Is Us. I mean, not This Is Us. Is it This Is Us? What's the one with the Lupita and the Stabby?
Yeah, that's This Is Us.
Is it This Is Us? With the suits. Anyway, where they see themselves, you know, like alternate versions, evil selves. These things come into their houses. And the thing is, anything that has to do with the house for me is terrifying, because a house is where you're supposed to feel the safest. It's your fortress, it's your castle. You know, there's a reason why women get terrified about the whole statistics of like, you're likely to be attacked 3 kilometers from your front door because your guard is down. In your house, your guard is way down. You're walking around without a care in the world like a Lannister, you know, just doing your thing. And in comes this person and you have to survive. Maybe your children are in an upper level and you're in the lower level and you have to try and it's so those things I think are like tangible fears for me that are beyond any monster because they can happen. That's not to say that the supernatural stuff is not relevant, because all that stuff is the stuff like we talked about, like the, you know, the basic stuff, the stuff that is primal. But this can happen. Someone can bust into your house and now what? You know?
Thanks very much. Can I just interrupt with another question? So we've had a question from Kat Hellison. She asks, she'd be interested if Chikodili and Tendai, would you ever write a novel together? Maybe alternating voices and characters in a kind of horror dystopia, especially?
Probably.
Could probably. It's you know, I've always wondered, because I've never done it before, that process of, I know there is the South African combo, is it SL Gray? That's like an amalgamation of like 2 or 3 different authors working together. Yeah. How would that work though, the process? Because I mean,
basically
stylistically,
I tried it with one other writer. I tried it on like Google Hangouts, not Google Hangouts, Google Chat or something a few years ago, before it kind of like petered out. But I think it's just a matter of like deciding what the structure of what the actual plot of the story is and going from there. So maybe like it will be, say you write the first one, we know what the plot loosely is. You write the first one and I write the second one, and you have to read the second one to continue. You can't just continue the plot, because obviously, as we know, in like writing, even if you're writing for yourself, sometimes you drop a plot and even you don't follow your own plot because characters come in and they're like, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna come in and stab this person in the eye, and you're like, oh my God, I have to do this now. You know, so there is that whole maybe loose plot, nothing rigid, and then alternate chapters, I reckon. And each person has to read the chapter before they decide how to go on. But right now, I think we both have our hands full. It'll probably be like in the next 10 years, maybe.
Exactly, because for the next few years, we've both, I know the projects that you've got, you know, in the drawer, and I've got a few, but I do hope the opportunity arises at some point.
Before we die. I know I keep talking about us dying, but before we die, you know.
Before we die, but if not, what we'll do is we'll do a joint James Patterson and just farm it out and get someone else to write it for us, and we'll just put our names on there. I think I think that's the ultimate.
Yeah, but who are we going to farm it out to? Some up and comer that wouldn't know that we're paying them like very small money.
Okay, and we've got another question from Noel Chidwick. He says, the best film monsters are ones that you can't see or are hidden or behind you. How do you work that kind of hidden horror into a written horror story?
I mean, with me, oh, sorry, do you mind if I take this first?
Yeah.
Okay, so in the story that Tendai was talking about in the book he has in his hand, African Monsters, my story in there had to deal with this monster we never see. Okay, now you have to remember that before anything gets made into film, it exists in script form first. Okay, so no matter what happens, it's always there in the word form first. So it is just a matter of finding ways to show the monster's influence without necessarily showing the monster. So they could influence people's emotions, for instance, and cause them to turn on each other, or they could influence the setting, the actual setting, or in the case of this bush baby that I got published in African Monsters, the anthology, he influenced everything. You know, anytime he came with, and I'm not spoiling it for anyone, but anytime he came, the lights went out, you know, which is a big deal. But also not only that the lights went out, but you couldn't move. So you were rooted to the spot. And then would come the screaming. And it was like waves of screaming. And it just sounded like nothing you'd ever heard. It was, you know, I remember reading about how prisoners in Guantanamo were actually tortured by having the baby's cry played over speakers. And before I had a child, that wouldn't have meant anything to me. But upon having a child, I realized just how great it's not that it's great, it kind of like it goes into somewhere that you don't even think you have, and it hits it there. Like it's like you can't think, I remember like my kid crying and I'm seeing colors. Like apparently I was having hallucinations. I didn't know. I was seeing lights, because I was sleep deprived and, the crying. And so this monster does that too, where when they cry, everything in your being stands to attention. Your body, the hairs on your body rise, the guy was frothing at the mouth because it's so loud. It's like nails on a chalkboard times infinity. So he's like frothing at the mouth because his ears can't stand it anymore. So it's those kind of like cues. It's like a taste, smell, feeling, it's all of those things. You have to kind of make these people, in the absence of like seeing it yourself, watching it, the visual media, you have to feel it, So for me, there's a bit where this guy, after all the screaming, dies down, this monster retreats because he comes and tortures him for 7 days. His tooth kind of like falls out because he's grit his teeth so hard that he's actually cracked his own tooth and he's like spitting it out, So there are different ways of doing that, of kind of like, in the absence of visual media, is having people feel what you feel and taste what you taste and imagine what you imagine.
And a crucial sort of like component at the other side of that is creating a sympathetic character that the reader will root for, that the reader doesn't want this gruesome stuff to happen to them, so that they can empathize. Because if they don't give a shit about, that particular character and that story, then all this gruesome stuff doesn't quite connect. But when it does,
and that's where we have those horrible Saw movies that just didn't touch me. The gore and the people just getting their arms sliced off. Who cares? So I agree.
And I also particularly love it, that there is this kind of like horror trope that might work in film sort of like visually, where they do stupid things and the monster gets them, it picks them off one by one if they're a group of characters.
Yes. It's always the guy called Chad. It's always the guy called Chad. What is with these Chads? Yeah. Is it Chad or a Josh? Some jock,
Blame the Americans. But I also find if your character is like acting rationally and doing all the things they can do to prevent their own demise, to prevent themselves from being got, but this thing somehow still keeps coming at them, that sort of like ratchets up the tension. But yeah, there's all these little tricks that you can do to make it work for the reader. And if you are spooked out while you're writing it, that's always the best indicator that you've nailed it. Yeah.
Well, thank you both. Seems to me like you're sort of also suggesting that you sort of attack the humanity within somebody is a kind of way of evoking fear. And this has been a really interesting chat. I'm sorry that we cut it there. That's just the format of the show, I'm afraid. But thank you so much. And I hope everyone in the audience will also thank you in their own way. So we'll put our virtual hands together for Chikodili and Tendai. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Kat.
And I've just
Absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Tendai. And we've just a few announcements before we say goodbye. So we've lots of events coming up, actually, all online. So on the 10th of August, we have a reunion, which we do every year with Jane Yolen, Joe Walton, Ada Palmer, and Rachel Plummer. On the 16th of August, Kat Hellison will be answering your writing and publishing questions and destroying bad writing rules. And then on the 20th of August, we've got a Lit RPG showcase, in which we'll hear from Taran Matheru, Jay Boyce, Jonathan Schmidt, and myself, because I've got a new book coming out. So all that's left is to say, please do check out our website, shorelineinfinity.com, where you can find out about those events and more events coming up. And again, we just want to say a few thank yous to Chikodili and Tendai in particular, also to our sponsors, Creative Scotland, and to Shoreline Infinity, especially Noel, who's on the tech there, handling everything, and to our audience for coming along tonight and listening. So once again, Chikodili, Tendai, and everyone else, thank you so much, and good night.
Thank you. Thank
Well done,
you.
Russell. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. It is brilliant.
Everyone gone, Noel?
No, it's still there.
All right, okay.
That was great. That got me pretty fired up to write a horror story now. I'm going to go off and get my
Yeah.
fountain pen and find a quiet, dark corner somewhere and scare the shit out of myself.
Even your description, Chikodili, of like that torture was like pretty scary. I think there's something really about torture that's so frightening. And the thing about
Right,
the
right.
teeth,
But
the teeth falling
I think
out
it's also
too.
because we can't understand who would or what would want to torture us.
Yeah.
You
It's
know,
so
because in
alien.
everybody's story, they're the good guy.
Mm,
Mm.
yeah.
You know, you're the good guy. So why would this thing be after you? And that's
Yeah.
pretty scary.
Yeah.
Hi. Are we still live?
Yeah, we're still alive.
Yeah.
But
Okay,
people
don't
still
start
listen.
swearing.
I mean, we've been
I'm
swearing
talking to
anyway.
Tonight, don't start swearing.
Welcome
We're
everyone
not
to the
alone
green
yet.
room, and the Shoreline shows. Everyone's welcome to the green room at the end, so that's fine.
Yeah. See who's still in here. We've got Steve somewhere in there. Hey, Steve.
Oh yeah.
He's
Steve's
looking a little rough there.
he's a regular
Yeah,
to our live events usually.
I like your background, Noel.
yeah. That's my room. That's what it looks like.
Really?
If only, oh, fantastic.
I thought that was like some
That's-
wallpaper
yeah.
or something.
No, it's good old virtual reality.
It looks
It's-
good.
At Disney World, they're opening a new hotel, which is in the Star Wars universe. And the hotel itself is like you're on a spaceship. So you look at the window and you see the stars and things, and you can go into the restaurant. And
this?
it's in Disney World in Florida.
Oh, well, you lost me at Disney World. I thought it was like somewhere I could go to. Disney World, I'm not doing. But oh my goodness, that sounds so good. My kid is into Star Wars, you see. He's
Yeah.
mad about Star Wars.
It looks really cool.
Good, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's a
But
great
I actually have to shoot off, I'm afraid.
Yes.
But thanks
We're
so
not
much.
sure what we should do. Should we leave?
Yeah, you can just leave whenever you like. That's
You
fine.
can say
Bye.
farewell.
Like the audience
Time for
except for
Chikodili.
Steve is gone.
Yeah.
Thank you
I'll
so
call you
much.
later, Tendai.
All right, my
Okay,
dear. Thank
thank
you
you
for doing
again.
this.
Bye.
With the big exit, that's it. Thank you very much.
Right.
I'll close the doors last. Make sure everyone's out safely.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, thanks again,
Oh.
Tendai. That was really great.
Yeah, and I'm glad you got your Shoreline 19.
No.
18. Yeah.
I did. Thank you. I apologize with just how drawn out the process of getting it through was, but now I have it. It's beautiful, and
Yeah.
I've just been going through like a really manic period at the moment. Just trying to juggle a million and one things, deadlines. That's the problem that I'm having now. But I enjoyed going through the Slash. How are we doing with that for the next issue?
Yes, I'm going to go through tomorrow to pick out the top stories to go for the last final decision-making process. So that should be sorted out by the weekend. I'm just going to work out how many words I've got room for the next issue and how many to put to the issue after that. So obviously it depends. If there's lots of long stories, lots of 6,000 worders, we'll have to do something about that. Sort of balance them around a bit. But there's some really good stories. I'm looking forward to publishing this next issue. Some good stuff in there, I think. Don't know if you felt the same, people?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I was being extra strict and I think only allowed 5 through in the end of that.
Yeah.
I caught a few. I think you went through them before I did, Russell, because like you end up seeing some of the